Welcome to Danny Designs. I'm Danny Level 100, and today I'm going to be talking about Mass Effect Andromeda's campaign and multiplayer. Warning, there's going to be spoilers. If you haven't beat the game, I recommend you don't watch this video until you have. All my comments, thoughts, and critiques are my own, and they're not meant as a personal attack on anyone on the Mass Effect Andromeda team, or anyone who's worked on the game in the past, present, or future. And I'm also not going to be talking about certain controversies surrounding the game, as that might be an entire video on its own. And with that all being said, let's get right into it. A quick note before we begin. I had just about finished Mass Effect Andromeda right when the patch came out. The last 2 hours of the game were post-patch. So many of my complaints, I think, are still valid because I did experience them. Keep in mind that some of my complaints will most likely be addressed or already have been addressed by the time this video comes out. One thing that desperately needed to be improved was the inventory system. The inventory system was punishing before the patch. You could only carry 50 items. This wouldn't be an issue if you didn't carry all your items with you. For example, you carry every weapon mod, every consumable, and every piece of armor with you at all times. If you were going on a mission and you wanted to pick up a piece of armor or any sort of loot you found, it would take up inventory space. I thought maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe I can go back to the Tempest and store all my guns or armor pieces or weapon mods or what have you. Lo and behold, there isn't a weapons locker or any way to just keep everything stored. It led to me going on missions with essentially only one gun, one set of armor, which wouldn't be an issue if I was able to switch weapons out mid-game. If the game's going to force me to carry every single gun in my inventory, my limited inventory, allow me to switch them out mid-combat, but I wasn't able to. I'm not allowed to. And the lack of inventory space had a very adverse effect on me and my playstyle. It forced me to pick a couple of weapons from the start of the game and stick with them. It felt as if the game didn't allow me to try any of the new weapons. I just stuck with the Carnifex and Mattock right from the bat because those are the weapons that worked for me. I never wanted to experiment with anything because it seemed too risky to go on a new mission and have a weapon that I'm not happy with. Every time you pick up a new item, whether it is a rare mod or common minerals, the game pauses and asks you if you want to pick up the item. Every time. This is especially frustrating before the patch. Combat sequences are interrupted by having to go into your inventory, finding items to toss or deconstruct to make space for something you want. Imagine my frustration where mid-combat I find a rare weapon mod I really want, but I now have to go through all my inventory to find something to get rid of. I'm there for 2 minutes looking for something to throw away or deconstruct to make space. It's extremely frustrating. And this happens multiple times. When you only have 50 inventory slots and you're carrying with you 20 weapon mods, multiple armor pieces, it's just punishing. And like I said, this wouldn't be so bad if you're allowed to store these on a weapons locker on the Tempest. I mean, for crying out loud, the Tempest has a weapon locker, but you can't store anything there. This is like something that just completely boggles my mind and frankly ruined a lot of the gameplay experience for me. Many of the Ket weapons I tried out felt completely inferior to anything from the Milky Way. The Milky Way galaxy were the weapons I was familiar with from the previous games and were the ones that felt just completely rewarding to use. And here's another thing that when it comes to weapons, I felt was very poorly explained. On the Research and Development tab, you have Milky Way, Helios, and Remnant research tabs. I'm not sure how, and I'm pretty sure how I missed this. Early on in the game dumps a lot of information on you, so I had no idea that in the R&D section, I could research and develop Helios and Remnant. I played 50 some hours of the game, near to completion, before I figured out that I could develop Helios and Remnant weapons. For the longest time, I did not know I could do these things. I was sticking to my tried and true Milky Way weapons, and not even intentionally at this point. And a quick critique of that, the Remnant, their weapons are built into them, right? They're robots, so their weapons that they use are completely built inside of them. So it's not the same. When you're fighting a Ket soldier, you shoot him and he dies, he drops the Zalkin, and you realize, hey, a Zalkin is a Ket rifle I can use. When you destroy the Remnant, almost never have they ever dropped for me a Equalizer or a Scattershot or any of the other Remnant technology-based weaponry. That has almost never happened. To me, a quick critique I would say is the Archon can have a Black Ops team of elite Ket soldiers that utilize Remnant weapons. For example, have some Ket chosen with Equalizers. You can even have it in a situation where when you kill one of these Black Ops people, Sam will say something like Ryder, I'm detecting Remnant-based technology in these Ket weapons. And then Ryder will be like, hey, Sam, let's scan these, let's get a blueprint and try to reverse engineer them. This can help us in the initiative. We can make more weapons or something. That's like something that they could have tied into the game. They could have made it more apparent that there were these Remnant weapons. Once again, I played over 50 hours of the game not knowing the Remnant weapons were in there. And that, I think, was partially due to the game never telling you that they existed. The fact that the UI system and the research and development is so complicated. And that's another big problem is the UI for just the most basic of things. You play Mass Effect 2 or 3, you go to the store, and what do you see? You see items that you want to buy. When you go to the store in Mass Effect Andromeda, what do you see? Well, on the left, you see every item you own for some reason, and on the right, you see all the weapons and items in the store. And all that's broken up in a really hideous, horribly designed layout. I'm not a UI person, and I have designed UIs on my own, but I would design a very simple UI. You go to the store, there's all the weapons you want. You hit a button to cycle through weapons, armor, minerals, etc. You hit another button to bring up items you own. So you know, hey, I can sell this salvage, I can sell that. But I would never have it that you would go to the store and you would just have everything just there. And it's one of the worst UIs I've ever seen in any mainstream game I've ever played. I spent 15 minutes trying to find a goddamn cave because the compass kept pointing me in the wrong direction. Every time I went to this cave, it said it was on the other side or on top of the mountain or whatever. I have Twitch stream footage of this. 15 minutes of trying to find a cave. The compass is garbage. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen. It would have been very helpful if Sam said, according to our intelligence, the raiders are hiding inside of a cave near the mountain. Just something like that. And I wouldn't have spent 15 minutes driving all over this mountain to try to find them. Because, I mean, if I knew it was in a cave, I would have looked for a cave. That simple. So I don't need Sam telling me every second that the temperature is hot or too cold or whatever. I don't need that. Landing on the planet Kadar, the player will land on a port. But most of the actual exploration of that planet involves going to the wastelands, which means the player has to engage in a cutscene to land, and then travel to a quick tram nearby, and take that tram to the wastelands. When they take that tram there, they then have to run out all the way to the wastelands before they can actually explore. I don't understand why there isn't an option when landing on Kadar to pick a port. Do I want to get off at the port? Do I want to get off at the wastelands? This is a minor inconvenience, but it wastes time. Timing myself during this sequence, I realized that it takes me over a minute and a half to get from the Tempest to the planet to the wastelands. And you might say, hey, aren't you being a little entitled? Don't you think that's not a lot of time? And I'll tell you, in a 50-hour game plus, you're going to be wasting plenty of time doing this. Another small thing that really annoyed me was I would go complete a mission, go back to the Tempest, and immediately have to go back to the planet. This happens multiple times throughout the game and during multiple quest lines. You complete a mission, go to the Tempest to read your emails, and boom, you have to go back to the planet. And here's another thing. The reading, I don't even know how to explain this, but in Mass Effect Andromeda, where you play as Ryder, a person with a highly advanced AI in your mind, you have to go to the Tempest to read emails at a terminal. The whole UI system for the quests is already, once again, really poorly designed, but the fact that in the future, the main character with an advanced AI in their head has to go to a computer terminal to read emails. I can't do it on my Omni tool. I can't have Sam just read it to me. If I wanted to, I'm pretty sure I could figure out how to get this burner phone I'm using to read my emails right now. One thing that I noticed as well is that the Ket are completely unsympathetic. They're militaristic, genocidal, xenophobic. I mean, they're pretty much everything you can imagine is bad. I mean, you could say they hate music, they're misogynistic, they lie, they cheat, they steal. They're pretty much the worst of the worst. They're completely unsympathetic. There's no reason to ever like them. Actually, I never had a problem destroying them because they were just monsters with spaceships, essentially. And there's a moment in the game, in the story mode, where you can actually team up with one of them, but there's really no reason to ever do that. Like, I don't know. I'm sure people chose that option just to see what happens, but in my playthrough, it just came off as completely, like, tone deaf. Like, why would I work with the monster? You know, it made no sense to me. Here's something that's kind of a nitpick. The lack of wildlife. I feel like it needs to be mentioned, though. It's really lame to see the exact same couple animals on every planet. How does a Dimetrodon live on a jungle planet and an ice planet? I would rather have less, but specified wildlife if it meant the wildlife would be more diverse, right? I want to go to the ice planet Vold and see a Yeti monster. I don't want to see these wild lizard creatures. It makes no sense how they would live there. And I understand there might be a lore reason for that with the Jardan and all that, but it just seems like a way to reuse assets. And in a game like Mass Effect Andromeda, which I will say feels like they're cutting corners here and there, it doesn't look good. Less animals, but more specific for the planets, that'd be much appreciated. One of the most disappointing things of the game is that many of the faces are repeated in the game. The Asari almost all have the same face. In fact, they all might have the same face. The same goes for the Turians, the Solarians. They're all very similar looking, and for somehow Mass Effect 2 and 3 didn't really have this problem. I feel like they changed it up a little bit. The most egregious example of repeating faces is, but when you go do one of the Krogan loyalty missions for Drack, you see Drack. One of the other Krogan there is exactly Drack's face. When you see Drack, he's very unique. He has a goatee made of bones. He has bones all around his face. He's very scarred. He's old. He's very unique. But then you see his face again on another Krogan, and it takes me out of the game completely. And it's disappointing because Drack is one of my favorite characters, and I felt he probably one of the most unique looking Krogan in any of the Mass Effect games. So to see his face repeated again, even if it was only for that one instance, it was just a complete disappointment. And I don't want to hear anyone say, well, that other Krogan is also from the Nakmor clan, so of course he's going to look just like Drack. Yeah, to me, that's not good enough. It took me out of the experience. It broke my immersion. It was bad. And the fact that somebody at BioWare cleared it, that to me doesn't sit right. As a game designer, I'm always thinking about what the player is going to experience. And I know having a main character having their face repeat in the game at any time is going to take a player out of it. And in terms of gameplay with the Nomad, I found it to be pretty good. I didn't really have any problems with it. I actually did enjoy traveling around with the Nomad, but to be honest with you, once we got to like the midway point of the game, I was quickly fast traveling everywhere to avoid having to drive across a giant map. And this is something I didn't expect from this game, was the amount of exploration that you had to do. I mean, every world essentially is a open world. That works sometimes, it doesn't work all the time for me, but for the most part I did appreciate it. I'm playing this game on ultra high settings, GTX 1070 computer with 16 gigs of RAM, quad-core CPU, and the game is stunning at times. It's very beautiful. That's one thing this game got right. The environment art is on point on some of these levels. One level that stood out for me especially was PB's loyalty mission. The beautiful lava, the rock formations, the remnant tech jutting out of the side. It was all very stunning and it was very beautiful. Those are moments that really got me invested into the environments. Those are the things that BioWare definitely focused on. They definitely went all out with the environments, and I'll give them credit where credit is due, because if you're playing on a high-end rig, you're probably going to also be taken aback by how beautiful the game looks. Personally, one of the most controversial changes BioWare made to Mass Effect Andromeda's combat is the choice to remove pausing the game in the middle of combat. Previous installments of Mass Effect 2 and 3 When you hit the weapon wheel command to change your weapons, it would slow down time. And this allowed you to tell your allies, your squad members, to target enemies with their weapons or their abilities. And this allowed for some strategic elements of the game, some tactical gameplay, where you can then create combo detonations and focus fire. It's an odd choice because they took it out because they wanted the game to be more fast-paced. But like I said, the gameplay kind of can feel lopsided at times because you're picking up items. You have to discard items, and it's something that I think really hurts the game. I really don't like this. I know you could tell your squad members to focus fire or to take cover or where to go, but it's something that I rarely used in combat, and once again, it kind of affected my playstyle, where I would just do my own thing, and my teammates were just kind of there to be distractions, whether it was distracting me or distracting the enemy. It doesn't really matter who you bring with you, because you can't really build around them. For example, in Mass Effect 2, I didn't have a good anti-armor system built into my weapons or my abilities, so bringing Mordin along with his Incinerate ability, or Thane with his Warp ability, so that way we can take out armored enemies faster. There's no way to really build strategy like that anymore. For example, I set up Cora to do combo detonations, so I would prime enemies with the hope that she would then detonate them. Mass Effect 2 and 3, where you had more control on the battlefield, this feels more up in the air. It's not a welcome change. One thing I noticed about this game as well is that many of the levels and enemy encounters seem a little lopsided to me. Early on in the game, when you're doing a lot of traveling, you have to jump out of the Nomad and engage Ket. One of the problems with that is, depending on your playstyle, this can be a very punishing combat system, right? Early in the game, I adopted scoped weapons and started fighting at range. So many of the encounters are completely at range. And you might say that that's kind of specific, right? But no, many of the encounters are at range, and most of the level design I found to be either unintuitive to combat, or it didn't really work with my playstyle. With my playstyle, I became a Vanguard, and I never really used the player profiles or any of that. I just ended up using ranged weaponry and Vanguard charges to just charge in, regenerate my shields, charge back, and I made quick work of most enemies. But I feel like if you're playing on Soldier, you might get a better use of some of the level layouts, but you also probably will have one of the most disappointing times because you're going to be just at a long distance. It's really cool to see the mod system, but once again I found out that you can really exploit this. Around midway through the game, I built the Black Widow and I gave it an antique heatsink. So that allowed me to have an extremely powerful sniper rifle that could fire 2 shots off, and it will just regenerate ammo pretty much in the same amount of time it takes to reload the 2 shots. It rewarded me as a player because many of the encounters were at range and it was a high damage weapon. Those encounters that were kind of annoying at first, where I'm shooting a pistol at long range, became almost negligible when I could just snipe people with little to no challenge. And as a Vanguard, I became a Vanguard sniper where I was cloaking, charging, and sniping. So I was making quick work of anything and anybody I was coming across. Speaking of which, there's something about this game, it just seemed to lack a lot of enemy variety. Majority of the game, you're fighting against the Ket. And you fight against the Ket, I would say for a good, 70% of the game is just Ket. And you quickly fight against the same units again and again and again and again. I really would have enjoyed it if the Ket had more variety, but this goes for actually the best enemy group in the game, if I had to pick one, the Outlaws and the Raiders, because they were made up of Milky Way forces, so they can use powers like the Asari, can use backlash against you, Solarian Agent can use the decoy. That to me was far more interesting. One of the things I did enjoy about the game was the combat. For the majority of the game, the combat sequences were super engaging and they were fantastic. Like, I really got a lot out of the combat. The gameplay is probably the best in the series. The verticality, the jetpack, all of it comes together very well. So even though I said one of the problems is that you kind of get into the swing of things and it kind of becomes the same. Early on, when you're first using the weapons and using the cover and everything, it can be super engaging and rewarding. The combat is top notch. And I would recommend checking out the multiplayer if you love the combat. The multiplayer, I feel like those levels are way better designed for combat and for weapons and for powers than the single player ones are. And don't get me wrong, I understand In the single player, they had to design a level for one person that could basically come in with any variety of powers, weapons, combinations, profiles, etc. Don't get me wrong, when I say I don't think the levels in the single player are good, I'm talking about the engagements, like the combat bowls and the all that stuff. I don't think they work, only because it wasn't really set up to work for everyone. Some people are probably gonna get a better experience with the levels in the single player than others. Like I said, if you were one of those people that love the combat, the multiplayer is probably for you. Another thing a lot of people complained about or had issues with was the characters. And I have to say that for me, the characters, they either work or they don't work for you, depending on the situation. The characters obviously tie very heavily into the story. And the story of the game has a great premise. The idea of leaving the Milky Way galaxy to discover the Andromeda galaxy. It's a great premise. But I feel like sometimes it's taken too lightly. And I feel like sometimes in the game, it's a little too jokey at times. And getting back to the characters, I feel like most of the characters in the cast were good. I enjoyed the characters. I see a few standouts for me were definitely, I think Vetra was a really well performed character, voice acting and performance, backstory. I mean, a lot of characters were performed pretty well. And to me, a standout was Drack. Drack's voice work, I think, is superb, and the writing for Drack was great. Like, I really enjoyed him and his backstory. There's one mission in the game in particular where you have to choose between the Solarian Pathfinder or the Krogan Scouts. It's one of those moments where I chose to go with the Krogan Scouts because I really like Drack as a character. And there's a part after that mission where Drack comes up to you and he talks to you and says, "You're the first person to look at the Krogan as more than just muscle and fodder. You respect us." And that's a moment that really resonated for me, because I feel like that was such an honest thing for Drack to say. And to me, somebody who, from playing the original series, Krogan are one of my favorite races in the game. And it's almost like the Andromeda Initiative, they make it very clear that the Andromeda Initiative kind of brought the Krogan along because of their combat capabilities. So to have Drack acknowledge that you chose his people over the Solarian, to me that really did stick out, and I would say that's one of my favorite moments in the game. When it comes to other parts of the story, I have to say I don't think it's that strong. One of my biggest complaints of the story is the Remnant and the Jardan, and essentially everything with the reactors and all of that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would not want a game where you go to the Andromeda Galaxy and all the planets are fine. I feel like it just shows a little bit of weakness in BioWare's writing, that they felt they had to make a game that basically had the Protheans in it. The Jardan and the Remnant, all that, it's essentially the Protheans. We kind of cop out to explain how are they going to terraform the planets. Oh, this race of sort of Protheans just created terraforming machines, and Ryder's the only guy that can interact with it. I feel like it's just weak writing. Personally, if I had to write a story for Mass Effect Andromeda, I would stay very far away from anything that felt like Protheans. And that's why a lot of people are saying this game feels like a soft reboot. In terms of story, when you're talking about story and characters, it's the characters that really carry this. And, depending on how you feel with the characters, you may not... So don't get me wrong, I fully am aware that the story can be weak at times, the dialogue can be weak at times, but there definitely are moments that shine. And to be frank with you, I was not enjoying the game, at least story-wise. Probably 10 hours in, I was considering dropping the game. It wasn't really going anywhere. One of the worst things they could do is tell you to explore the planets and then completely cut you off from them. Obviously, that's part of the story. You eventually start terraforming Eos, and more of that radiation gets taken away and you can explore. But it's kind of a bummer when you're given the option to explore and you're very, very closed in. So I completely understand why some players just absolutely hate the game. This is a game where you have to put in the 20 hours, and if you don't, then you're not going to enjoy it. It's like when a friend recommends a TV show to me and they say you gotta watch like 10 episodes and you'll be in. And usually I don't like that at all. I hate that. I'm like, why am I going to commit 10 hours of my life to a TV show I might not like? Which is why I think it's kind of bogus for me to say the same thing to you, to say, hey, play this game for 20 hours and then it gets good. So I feel like that is one of the biggest weaknesses in the game, is that if you don't get past that 20-hour mark, you're probably going to hate the game. And if you hate the game up until 20 hours, then you're probably not going to like it afterwards. For me, I was kind of going back and forth, and it wasn't until I hit that mark where I was like, okay, I'm in. I like the characters. I want to see where the story goes, and I like the game. One moment to me, big spoiler, don't, skip like a minute ahead if you don't want to hear this. But once you get all of Alec, the Ryder's memories, you hear logs of the Reaper invasion in Mass Effect 3. You hear the Reapers are destroying the Milky Way galaxy and all that. And Ryder just kind of is like, oh man, this is bad. What happened? And it's like, oh, we don't know what happened yet. We haven't heard back from them. Honestly, if that was me, as a Pathfinder, that would have raised the stakes so high. Even if this happens kind of late in the game, to know that there really is no help coming, that everyone might be dead, that would have hit me very hard. And I was very surprised to see my Scott Ryder, just kind of stand there and just be like, well, dang. Because I would have been like, I would have had nightmares, man. If I heard that the entire Milky Way galaxy might have been wiped out by Reapers, I would not be able to sleep for like a week. Are you kidding me? Another problem I had with the game's story was just the ending. The ending to me was not very good. And not because it's necessarily bad, but I guess the problem with the ending is that the stakes aren't really there. If you do not get all the Pathfinders, the Turian Pathfinder, Solarian Pathfinder, the only thing that happens to you is that a tertiary character, Captain Dunn, who's the captain of Hyperion, she dies, as far as I can tell. And to me, that seems like the stakes aren't very high. If you told me that you're going to go into the final mission with no Pathfinder assistance aside from yourself, felt like it should be a bloody victory. Like this, it just felt like we went in there, we kicked a lot of ass, we lost a couple people that will be missed. I had the best ending, I did everything right. But I feel even if you don't do everything right, the ending is still pretty good. I mean, in Mass Effect 2, if you did everything wrong, oh man, that game punished the hell out of you. It took me like 4 playthroughs of Mass Effect 2 to finally get Miranda to stop dying. 4 playthroughs. And I did everything. After all is said and done, how do I feel about Mass Effect Andromeda? I enjoyed my time with it when it worked. It was great. It had moments of brilliance. I feel the weakest element of this game is that it is a soft reboot that really only appeals to the hardcore Mass Effect crowd. A lot of people will tell you that this game is going to be a great place to start. I think that is honestly a bit of a stretch, because you're not invested at all in the universe. Then how are you supposed to feel for Drack? How are you supposed to know the history of the characters, the Turians, the Solarians, the humans? You're going to have a hard time getting invested in an entire universe and lore. That is, I think, the problem with this game. So with that, I can't really recommend this game to anyone unless they already invested time into the previous Mass Effect installments. Those are my thoughts, critiques, and insight into Mass Effect Andromeda's campaign. If you have any thoughts, suggestions, anything you'd like to say, feel free to leave a comment. And, if you like this video, please subscribe, follow, and most importantly, come find me on Twitch. I Twitch stream at least a couple times a week, and I would love to hear from you. If you guys want to talk about game design, I'm more than welcome a civil discussion and anything game related. So thank you guys once again for watching, and I'll catch you around. See you later. Goodbye.